We're back for part 2 of the best books published in 1987. All right, so we have already seen part 1, which is counting down from book number 1 to book number 10. If you haven't seen that, I will leave the link in the description below. And now we're on to the top 5 books published in 1987, according to Goodreads. Just to give a small recap, this list is one that I grabbed from Goodreads, and it's just whatever the most popular books that were published in 1987 end up on Goodreads members' to read list. So this is not an official list by any means. However, I will say that I found this list back in April and it's already August and the top 5 books have not changed. A couple of them traded places, but it's still the same 5 books overall. Before we jump into it, make sure you go ahead and subscribe and we'll get started on book number 5 as we work our way up to book number 1. And yes, there was another Stephen King in the top 5 books. So that's 3 Stephen King overall. That's a lot of King for 10 books. Figured we'd change up the background a little bit. Moving on to book number 5 on the list of best books published in 1987, and that is Hatchet by Gary Paulson. I just finished this yesterday. It is a middle grade. I think it said inside the book actually for ages like 10 to 14, and I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would. I ended up giving this a 3.5, and I only dropped it just because the ending of the book kind of brought it down a little bit for me. It ended rather abruptly, and I did try to take into consideration this is a middle grade, especially with it being, I think, in my opinion, in 1987, they probably won't take as many risks as some authors would in, the 2020s. But either way, I still had a good time. I feel like the pizza and the ramen might be a little distracting, so I'm gonna swing over to this side. Also, I'm right-handed, so it's gonna be easier for me to hold this book because it's actually a little bit heavy. Hatchet follows the story of a 13-year-old boy named Brian Robeson is how I pronounced his last name. His parents have just recently gotten divorced. He lives with his mom in New York, but he's going to be spending the summer with his dad up in like a drilling camp or something. I don't know, it's up north in Canada. So he has to get on a single engine plane, one of those tiny little planes that only seats like you and the pilot, and he's off on his way to go meet his dad. Of course, something goes terribly wrong. The pilot ends up having a heart attack midair. Brian's a kid. He doesn't know how to fly a plane. He's on the speaker. He's trying to find anyone that could help him. He does end up getting some voice, like, I don't know, a tower that's kind of close by, but he ends up going too far out of range. They've already gone off course a little bit because when the pilot had his heart attack, he ends up jerking the plane to the right, so they've already gone off the flight course. As you can imagine, they crash land. Luckily, the pilot kind of showed Brian how to control the plane a little bit earlier in the flight, so he's able to kind of guide the plane down, but they end up crashing into a lake. But he gets out, he's fine. The pilot's not fine, the pilot's dead, but Brian ends up getting out of the plane, out of the lake, and now he's stuck in the Canadian wilderness all by himself. So this poor kid is all alone in the Canadian wilderness. And unfortunately, because they landed the plane in a lake, I say they, it was Brian, because the pilot, he's gone. He lands the plane in a lake, which does soften the impact because he was aware enough to know, okay, if I land in the trees, I'm a goner. It's going to rip this plane to shreds. So he lands it in the lake. Unfortunately, it goes completely under the water. So even if a search plane does end up coming by, they're not going to see the wreckage, which is most likely what they're going to be looking for first. And he's just going to be a tiny little ant on the ground. So the survival options have gone up very, very quickly right at the beginning of the book. It was really fun to, well, I guess fun probably isn't the best word, but I really enjoyed watching Brian's transformation because the first couple of days, he's trying to keep track of time in his head, and he's like, they're gonna send a search party out. Like, he knows, I'm just a kid, my mom knows that I left, my dad is expecting me, they're going to be telling the authorities like, hey, our kid was supposed to be on this plane, on this flight, and he's not here. We got to go search for him. So he's very hopeful at the beginning that he'll be rescued in just a couple days. First day goes by and he's like, okay, 2 days, 3 days max. 2, 3 days go by and he's still holding out hope, but you can kind of see it draining the longer that he's out there because he's having to learn, okay, well, I need food, I need water. I really enjoyed seeing him, I want to say take charge of the situation, but he more so takes charge in the latter half of the book when he starts his second life, as he calls it. He goes down to the lake. He knows he has to have water. He goes foraging for berries. He learns how to make like a little spear and a bow and arrow. And so he's trying to get some fish out of the lake. And around not quite a week in, he hears a plane. So a plane is coming and he knows he's gone off the flight course. True to form, the search and rescue, they are going to be searching not only on the flight path, but also off to either side, just in case they went off course. And he hears the plane. And by this point, he's already made fire. He's been able to start a fire with his hatchet. And he's got this little like bonfire set up above the cave that he has made his little house in. And he's like, I'm not going to keep it burning the whole time because that would take a lot of wood. So I'll just get it ready. And then when a plane comes by, I'll take a torch from the fire in the cave and I'll run up there and I'll light the bonfire. And that's what he does, but he doesn't do it in time because he's away from camp at the moment when the plane is going by. And the plane doesn't see the wreckage. He can't get the fire started in time. And the plane turns around. It doesn't really do any like circles over the area. They're doing quick Passover and they're done. So he's lost what you think is the only option for him to get saved. And he kind of goes into this deep depression thinking, that was it. That was my chance. I'm not going to get saved. It's pretty disheartening because you're like, oh shit, this is a 13-year-old kid lost in the Canadian wilderness. What's he going to do? He's learning how to survive. But it's definitely a learning process. He even calls himself a city boy. He doesn't know, the best way to start a fire. He doesn't know the best way to forage for certain berries. He doesn't know how to fish. He's got to learn all of this stuff himself. And it's a really big learning curve. So you can just feel the weight of that knowledge sink down on him as you're reading through the book as he sees this plane fly away. The book is really heavy, so I'm not going to hold it up the whole time. So we've just missed the plane, and he does sink into a depression. And it gets pretty dark because it only mentions it for like a couple of short paragraphs. He goes up to, he's been in this little cave is where he's kind of made his home. And the night that the plane has gone over, left him, and he's like, I'm done for. I won't be able to ever get out of here. He takes his hatchet that his mom gave him way at the start of the book, and he goes up to the top of the cave, and he does try to end it all, which we'll just put it that way. He doesn't succeed, fortunately. He ends up kind of giving up on it and falling asleep on the top of the cave, wakes up in the morning, sees the dried blood, sees his hatchet laying there, and just kind of, that's when he's reborn, as he calls himself, into the new Brian. And at this point, we have some time passing because we had him in the wilderness by himself for a week. Plane comes, leaves him, and we do a little bit of a time jump, and we're now at 47 days. This kid has been living on his own for 47 days, 42 days as the new Brian. With the new Brian, we get him in a whole new light. He's kind of accepted the fact he's gonna be here for an indeterminate amount of time. There's still a little bit of hope that he's going to get rescued, but he also knows I can't just sit here and wait for that. So we get things like him learning how to make proper bow and arrows. He starts hunting and he starts fishing. He gets randomly chased by a moose, which it really wasn't funny because he did get hurt. He may have like broken some ribs or something, but in a way it was a little bit funny. I shouldn't have laughed, but I did. And he also survives a tornado that comes through. The tornado kind of rips apart his camp and all the things that he's made and has close by his camp, but he is able to rebuild from that. He's accepted his fate and he's meeting it head on, which was really fun to watch because you do get to see him grow. He is still a kid and he does still think about his parents. He does still think about the big secret that led to his parents getting divorced, which was his mom cheating on his dad. But he does sink occasionally into not a full depressive state, but he has his low points. He really comes into his own because he knows that he has to survive, and the only one out there to take care of him is himself. Speaking of the tornado, after the tornado, Brian is walking around his camp. He's seeing what got destroyed, what can be fixed and saved, and he notices that the plane, when he landed, remember, it went under the water in the lake. The plane was lifted out of the water by the tornado and not really moved into the best place, but it was lifted enough out of the water. So he ends up building a raft to go over to the plane because he remembers during the flight over, the pilot mentioned that there was, and I think he remembered seeing him pack a survival bag in the back of the plane. And now that the plane's out of the water, Brian goes, if I can get to the plane and get in there and get that survival pack, that might help me out. That'll help me survive even longer because there's going to be food, probably some matches, just basic survival gear for if the plane happened to go down. So Brian ends up building a raft. It does take him a couple days, but he manages to get over to the plane and he starts hacking away at the aluminum outside of the plane, the aluminum body, with his hatchet. At one point, he drops his hatchet, and at that point, even I was like, oh shit, because honestly, most of this stuff, like, he wouldn't have been able to get done, and I don't think he would have survived this long had he not had his hatchet at the very beginning. But he dives down, gets the hatchet back, he manages to get into the plane and find the bag, and rafts back over to where his little cave is. And there's all kinds of stuff in this bag. Like, not only is there a first aid kit and matches, but there's also a sleeping bag. There's obviously some like freeze-dried food. There's a first aid kit. There's soap. Like, he's so incredibly excited about being able to bathe and like wash his hair because it's been almost 2 months at this point. So he's got all this stuff from the survival bag. He's laying it out in his cave and he is just thinking he's the richest man on earth right now. In the bag, there is an emergency transmitter, and he picks it up. He doesn't really know what to do with it. He kind of like flips it on and messes with it, but because he's not sure about it, he just sets it to the side. And he has all of these things, including a pretty good amount of food, and he's like, I'm gonna ration this out, but tonight I feast. So he sets out to make a feast with all of the food that is in this bag. And he's in the middle of about to start eating his dinner when he sees a plane land in the middle of the lake. This guy steps out and he goes, oh my God, it's really you. It's that kid that was lost. And here's where I have a slight issue with maybe not the book, but the people in the book who were supposed to be looking for this kid. The pilot who has landed is going, oh my God, you're him. They quit looking a month, almost 2 months ago for you. I'm sorry, what? The kid has only been gone a little less than 2 months. So obviously, Brian is saved. They get him back to civilization with his parents and everything proceeds as normal as normal as it can be for the rest of his life. But the kid was gone. Hold on. Brian was stranded for 54 days. And you're telling me that they looked for, maybe a week? And they just went, I don't know. Too bad. Your kid's gone forever. Sorry. And just gave up? Oh my God. I would have given up hope too if I knew that's how they were thinking. That part kind of pissed me off. I'm not gonna lie. I get it. You can't hold up search and rescue just until you decide you're done. But it's like they didn't even try. Again, both parents know that he's missing. Obviously, there was a search and rescue that went out, but it seems like maybe they looked for a week, and then because they couldn't find the wreckage and they also didn't see any sign of him, they went, oh well. And you're telling me the parents were just like, damn, lost our kid. You didn't try at all? So that kind of pissed me off. That's why, because at first I was going to rate this a 4, but because of that ending, it dropped down to a 3.5. Overall, I really did like this book. Because it is a middle grade, I was a little more willing to overlook a few convenient plot points of the book, such as at the very beginning when his mom, on the car ride to the airport, is like, hey, I bought you a present, and it's the hatchet. That's such a random gift, but she's like, oh, you can use it when you're up in the wilderness with your dad. So I guess I could see how it would make sense, how it would track, but it was just a little bit of a random and perfectly convenient gift to give this kid, because he uses this hatchet for everything. If he didn't have that hatchet at the very beginning of when he got lost, he would have probably been in a hell of a lot more trouble. I do like that he didn't even try to go after the survival pack in the plane until at the very end of the book, because I feel like the urgency and the survival factor would have just gone way down if he had had access to it at the very beginning, because he's got to learn how to survive from scratch. And it was really fun to watch this transformation of him going from a city boy, as he calls himself, and not knowing how to do anything, and just for a couple hours going, this is how it ends. I don't know what to do. Like, hopefully they come find me right now, to a kid who survives for almost 2 months on his own, trapping food, catching fish in the lake, kind of just being able to be independent and survive while still maintaining a little bit of hope that he's going to be found at some point. So overall, I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would. I did look up, because this is a series, I think there's 4 or 5 books total. I looked up the summaries of the next ones. I'm going to be honest, they sound a little bit silly, because in the second book, I think the summary is, I don't know, reporter or something. This news station wants to cover his story and kind of reenact what happened. So they send him and a reporter back to, I think, the same place where he ended up crash landing. And they're just going to kind of reenact it, except something happens with the adult. And so they have to, Brian has to make a raft and then raft them downstream to help. That just seemed really goofy. I was like, you're going to send this kid back to have to relive what he went through? Because then he has to obviously relive it again. I don't know. It kind of sounds like, because of the popularity of this book, we were trying to ride that popularity and create more situations for Brian. So I don't think I'll be continuing the series, but I enjoyed this more than I thought I would. Book number 4 on my best books list is Watchmen by Alan Moore. This was so good that I plan on going out and getting my own copy. That's how much I enjoyed it. I literally just forgot what I was going to say. This was a very political graphic novel, and it's actually the only graphic novel on this list. I enjoyed this way more than I thought. When I was telling Tien about the books that were on this top 10 list, and when I told him Watchmen was on there, he was like, I don't know how you're going to enjoy that one. He's like, I'm kind of interested to see what you think of it after you're done, because you're either going to really enjoy it or really not enjoy it. It's going to be one of the two, and he didn't know which way I was going to lean. But even right at the start, I was already like reading. I think I had maybe gotten 3 or 4 volumes in, and I looked at him and I was like, this is so good. And he was like, okay, kind of unexpected that you were going to enjoy it this much, because he thought I might enjoy it, that there was a chance. But I don't think he was also expecting me to enjoy it as much as I did. And I didn't either. While the graphic novel is extremely messed up in so many different ways. It's very dystopian, very sci-fi. It tells such a good story though, and it surprised me numerous times. There were multiple times in the book where either an event would happen or something would happen with a character or between a couple of characters that took me by complete surprise. It probably didn't really come out of left field if I had been paying attention, but even then, there were some things that happened with characters or to certain characters. And when it happened, it made sense and I was kind of expecting it, but it still shocked me. And I 100% would reread this. I really enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed the artwork as well. The designer, who was it? This graphic novel had two designers, John Higgins and Dave Gibbons, and both did excellent work. I can't wait to get my own copy of this and have it in my collection. And I think I'd like to read more of Alan Moore's work. He's written a lot of titles that I recognize, but previously just really didn't have a lot of interest in reading. And Watchmen was actually one of those, because prior to reading the book, I remember that they had created a TV show. I didn't know that there was a movie. I had some folks in my Twitch chat telling me like, oh yeah, it was a movie as well as a TV show. I do remember when the show came out, however many years ago, I watched the first episode and all I remember thinking was,
who is this big blue naked man and what is going on?
I was so confused. I only watched the first episode and then just completely lost interest, had no idea what was happening, and didn't really care to find out what was going on. But after reading the book, I would go and rewatch at least the TV show. I don't know how closely either the show or the movie follow the book, but I feel like I would have a better grasp on what's going on now that I've read it. 5 stars. I really don't have any notes. I appreciated everything that was in there. Some of the content that was in Watchmen, there were a few things that could be very triggering for people. A lot of heavy content if you've read it. But overall, it was done so well and it was so damn good. I didn't want to put it down. I thought it would take me a good handful of days to read just because going into it, I didn't know how much I was going to enjoy reading it. So I figured I'll take my time with it and not push myself to read. If I need to put it down because I'm not really enjoying it, I'll put it down. But I didn't want to put it down. Every time I would end a volume, I would be like, okay, well, I got to keep going. I got to know what happens next. So far, that's pretty good. Hatchet was a 3.5, and I think that's fair. 5-star for this one. We're starting off pretty strong for the second part of this best book series. Not doing too bad. Hopefully we can keep this up. Hopefully we got maybe not 5-star momentum, but at least, maybe a 4-star and up momentum, or at least a 3.5-star and up.
Book number 3, Beloved by Toni Morrison. I don't know if this is classified as literary fiction. It does kind of read that way. I don't know if I'd also call it like a coming of age, but it does tell the story of a second life in a sense. This follows, I believe you pronounce the name Sethi, and she is a former slave and she's come up to Cincinnati, Ohio, where she has sent her children and her mother-in-law ahead of her. She's escaped, and it follows her story after she gets out of the South and when she finally is able to get up to Ohio and meet back up with her family. The content that the book covers is obviously very emotionally heartbreaking, and it does not mince words. It hits you full in the face with it. It really does tell a story of you get pieces of the story before she leaves, not just from her, but from other characters. But you do also see her life and how things pan out after she's arrived in Ohio. The only things I didn't really care for some of the prose in the book. It was a bit hard to follow at times. I really had to slow down when I was reading this. It was just kind of difficult to take in the prose, and it did get confusing a couple of times because you not only swap POVs, but you also kind of jump back and forth occasionally in time. So, and that goes with like, you'll jump back from present day with Sethi, but you might go back in time, but it may be with a totally different character. And when you come back to the present time, it may not be with the main character, Sethi. I think she does qualify as the main character because that's who all the other characters, there's about 5 characters in total that we focus on, but all of their experiences do revolve around her. The biggest difference for me with this compared to Fried Green Tomatoes and compared to Norwegian Wood is these characters felt like they actually had dimension to them. The characters in the other 2 books, to me, felt very one-dimensional. Norwegian Wood, the characters had a little something behind the names, but to me, not a whole lot. They felt pretty flat. Fried Green Tomatoes, to me, the characters felt pretty flat. This one, you can feel all of the hurt, all of the anger, all of the love, all of the shock, the scare, the everything. You can feel all the emotions in the characters, in the book, in the words. So book number 3, and I can see how this one is at one of the top spots. Honestly, I think it should be higher than Norwegian Wood, personally. I can see how much emotion and how much feeling is put into this book, and I 100% do believe it deserves that top spot that it does have. I might need a bit more time to sit and just process everything, because this is definitely one that after you read it, you need to sit with it. I think I'm going to end up giving this one probably a 4, just because it was really difficult at times to follow what was going on, like who we are, when we are, what time. And even when I know, like, okay, this is from this character's point of view and like, here's the timeline that's going on, the prose did make it hard for me to kind of follow just what was going on in the character's mind, or like when the character is speaking to someone else. So that was probably what dropped it to a 4 for me. I'm not sure, again, what genre this falls under, but I would also place it under horror, because we do have some, what I think of as like supernatural horror, because after Sethi arrives in Ohio, one of the children that she sent ahead was her little daughter, Beloved. And one day these white men come into the yard when they're having a big party at the house. She sees them, and in her mind, she's like, I'm not letting them take my kids. My kids are not going back. They will not go through what I went through. She goes into, I think, the storehouse. It's like a area where they keep all the cold food. And she ends up killing her young daughter. She tries to kill her 2 boys, but I think she may have just kind of knocked them out, and they're laying on the floor pretending like they have passed away so that she won't go after them again and actually kill them. She has a small baby that she gave birth to on the way to Ohio, and she was about to go after the baby as well when the friends and family who are at this party, they break down the door, they take the baby from her, they stop her from continuing any more killing. So the baby that was murdered, she comes back to Sethi and to the young daughter, Denver, who was the baby that was born on the way. And at this point, I think Beloved would have been about 20 years old, like 20 or 21. And she just appears at the house one day. And previously, all of the friends and family, everyone in the town believed that that baby's spirit had been haunting the house, because weird things would happen in the house and they would attribute that to the baby that had passed away. And so one day, this young woman just appears in front of the house, and she says her name is Beloved, but she doesn't know where she comes from. She doesn't know who her family is. She, doesn't know if she's going anywhere in particular. And so she stays there at the house with Sethi and with Denver. And things they start out okay, but the baby's mad. The baby is upset, or the spirit of the baby is upset that her mother killed her. And she basically wants to make her mother suffer. In the end, that's what it ends up being. While it is a possibly like a literary fiction book, it does have horror in it as well. And that added to that overall tension and that overall just beyond uneasy feeling in the book.
If there's one thing I've learned from this next book, it's that I don't like literary fiction at all. This is number 2 on my top 10 list. How? That's my only question. How? Because not for me. This wouldn't even make it in my top 100. Listen, most of the time I can say, a book is not for me or a genre is not for me, but I can understand and appreciate how other people could appreciate the genre, appreciate this book. Not literary fiction, okay? I can't, period. I find it incredibly boring. And you can talk to me until you're blue in the face and try to explain, well, the author is trying to convey these feelings or trying to show this or trying to emulate that emotion with this character. I don't care. I'm gonna be honest, I don't care. I've read a handful of contemporaries and literary fictions, and every single time I go, why did I read this? I have never read one quite like this, though. This is not for me. I understand some of the things the author was trying to convey and some of the things they were trying to portray through certain characters, especially after ranting about it to Tien. Tien gets a lot of my rants about books, especially books I don't like. I get it, but I don't enjoy it. I don't think it's a fun time. And especially if you've read this book, I know people are going, well, it's not supposed to be a fun time. Oh, I get it. Trust me. I know it's not supposed to be a fun time. I don't enjoy literary fiction. And truly, I do not have anything nice to say about this book. I don't understand how it was number 2 on the list for 1987 most popular books published. It's just, oh my God. I didn't like any of the characters. All of the characters were terrible. Everything about them was annoying. And the main character, he just was so damn full of himself, truly. And the second girl, Midori, I had to look it up because I'm going to be honest, it's been a couple weeks since I've read it. She was giving off a lot of pick me, I'm not like other girl vibes. Didn't like that either. I don't like coming of age stories, or at least I didn't like this one. I won't read this author again. If I have the choice, I won't read literary fiction if I don't have to. And I don't have to. I made myself do this. I have to keep reminding myself. So sorry if that offends anybody. If you like literary fiction, that's great. If you like this book, that's great. Literary fiction and this book, not for me. I don't have anything nice to say. I didn't enjoy it. I gave it a 1 star, okay? I did not enjoy this whatsoever. It was such a slog to get through. It took me so long. This is not a long book, okay? Look at that. That's not a long book. Let's see. 293 pages. This should have taken me maybe 2 days max. I kept putting it down just because I didn't want to read it. I kept having to put it down because I was tired of the characters. I didn't want to read them anymore. I didn't want to interact with them. Oh my God. I'm so glad this book is done. If you liked it, great. Not for me. And no one will be able to convince me otherwise. Sorry. And even if people come in, they're like, oh yeah, well that one was kind of a hard take. You should try this other literary fiction. No, I don't want to. Literary fiction is not my friend. We are not besties. And I don't want anything to do with them. And honestly, it's kind of funny because what I like to do when I don't like something is I like to type in things like, I don't like literary fiction, Reddit. And then I usually get a bunch of Reddit posts. And from just over different years, it could be anything from a month ago to 10 years ago. Apparently people on Reddit really like literary fiction. And if you don't like it, you're wrong. Disagree, but okay. I was talking to my friends and I was like, what are your takes on literary fiction? I just wanted to know. I didn't give them my take, but I was like, what do you think about literary fiction? And all of them were like, it's not for me. I don't really care for it. So sorry, I'm not the only one. So this got a 1 star. I still don't understand how it was at number 2. I can kind of see how people would push it to number 2. I do, but I don't agree with it. And I'm just really glad this book is done. This was really hard for me to get through. I didn't enjoy it. Never again. We're done. Bye. No more literary fiction for me. Look how cute she is. She's so grumpy right now. Oh, she's such a grumpy girl. 5 stars. Easy. No notes. 10 out of 10. Okay, as I mentioned in like the intro and in other clips, the list that I was using from Goodreads changed slightly, but the list that I was using originally had Misery at the number 1 spot for months, and it absolutely deserves that number 1 spot. This was so damn good. I can't believe it's taken me this long to read, and I absolutely would read this again. It was terrifying in the best way. So it's been a couple of years, but I have seen the movie, and as I was reading this and things were progressing, I would stop and go, I don't think that's how it was in the movie. It was way more gruesome in the book, which honestly I liked a lot more. The ending was different, and the way that his legs get busted up, I guess is the best way to say it, is extremely different in the book than it is in the movie. And even though I knew what happened at the end, I knew the general idea just in general because this is such a popular book and because I've seen the movie. I knew the summary, I knew what was going to happen, I knew what happened at the end, but I still couldn't put this down. It still had me just locked onto the page every single chapter. In case you haven't read the book or seen the movie, or you really just don't really know a whole lot about Misery, we have a writer named Paul, and he's just finished his latest book. He was celebrating, ends up driving off of the road because he is drunk in the middle of this tiny little town. I think it's in Colorado. And a woman named Annie finds him and then brings him back to her house, and she's going to nurse him back to health. And things go terribly wrong. Annie has a lot of mental problems. She also, we find out, because this is very spoiler filled, I won't go into all the details, but we find out she hasn't been convicted, but she proceeded to kill a lot of people. She got away with it, but it was definitely her that did it. Paul is the author of this big series of novels whose title character is named Misery, and they're kind of a romantasy type of book, and so it's very popular, especially with women, and very much popular with Annie. He's ended the Misery books. He ends up killing off the main character, and he was like, that's the final book for that. I am done with this character. No more. I can move on with my life. Annie doesn't like that. So while she's imprisoned him at her house, she has him write an entire new novel, basically bringing Misery back to life, because she doesn't want this character to die. She doesn't want this series to end. She's forcing him to write this book. She's torturing him while he's writing it because she's forcing him to complete it. Otherwise, she's going to kill him. Although, as it goes on, he's like, I'm not going to get out of this alive. I'm dead with or without this book. But it's going to be a lot worse if I don't complete it. And he ends up kind of enjoying working on the Misery book as well. This book was just wild from start to finish because you are kind of thrown into it at the very beginning. And that does seem to be a trend with Stephen King books. This is the 3rd one I've read for this 2-part series, and the best of the 3, I will say. Gunslinger was fine, if not pretty confusing just because I don't really understand what's going on. This was by far the best of the 3 books that I've read from him so far. We start off with Paul like having already crashed. He kind of brings us back before the crash, Stephen King does, to explain how he got there, with Paul reminiscing in his mind while he's locked up in this bedroom and recovering. But we're just thrown into it. We get started right away. And as much as I do like world building, this works for me. It works without having to have all of this lead up with explaining, hey, here's this guy named Paul. He's a famous author. Here's what he's been doing. Here's what he's working on. Here's what he's doing right now. Uh-oh, now he's in trouble. Like, just drops you into it and we just go. We're already halfway down the track and on our way before we realize what's going on. You can kind of see Beau just like, he's just creeping around in the corner. He has the zoomies right now, so he's in the corner just being creepy, but that's okay, right? Yeah. Anyways, I have always had an interest in Stephen King, but any of the books that I kind of looked into, I was like, well, those are really large books. This one actually isn't that big of a book. And they just seemed really intimidating. So I would say if you're okay with mild gore, like I can't do gore, I can't do body horror, like extreme gore. This I could do. It was still extremely unpleasant to read some of the parts. It was still very horrific, but it was so good. Even when shit was going down, I didn't want to put the book down. I didn't want to look away from the page. I wanted to keep reading. And it just keeps you extremely tense the entire time. Even knowing what happens, I was flipping the pages going, is he going to get out of this? Is he going to be okay? What is she going to do to him next? Like, it definitely kept me on the edge of my seat. It definitely kept me wanting to read. I would find myself needing, well, like, not needing to take a break, but deciding, okay, I've been reading for like 2 hours. I'll take a small break and I'll come back to it. And then I'd be taking a break and like scrolling on my phone or watching TV. And then I just want to pick up the book again. That's a good book. That's a really good sign that it's an addictive book. I can see why this got the top spot. And even now that the ratings have changed for the books, this is still spot number 2. I think it should have stayed in spot number 1. I would highly recommend you read this. If you want a good horror novel, this one right here. This was so good. And I don't know if I wasn't expecting to find any 5 stars, but I was hoping that I would enjoy, like thoroughly enjoy at least a handful of books. Easy 5 star. I wasn't even done with this before I was thinking this is a 5 star for me. 100%, no doubt. So this was a good way to wrap up the best books of 1987. This one came out on top, where it belongs. We did it. The top 10 books published in 1987 according to Goodreads, and I only had 1 DNF. Granted, there were multiple that I just didn't really care for, and honestly, that's kind of to be expected. And there were some that I figured I wouldn't like from the start based on the summary, but that's not too bad. I did find some new favorites, and overall I enjoyed this. It was a good time. I don't know if I would do this again. I would have to check those other lists because I did find like 3 or 4 lists total, one of which was like the New York Times bestseller list from 1987. There was a reason I didn't do that one, but that might be for another video, so I'm not going to tell you why I didn't do it. But I think this was a pretty successful like top 10 video. It wasn't bad. So again, make sure you leave me a comment below to let me know if you've read any of these, or if there are any of these that you may want to read, whether or not you agreed with my opinion. So thank you for joining me for my birthday. Make sure you like and subscribe. Leave me a couple comments below letting me know Even if you don't actually plan on reading any of the books anytime soon, if you had to pick one from the top 10 list that I've given, which one would you pick? All right, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.